COVID guidelines for New York City public schools go into effect next week, which is expected to reduce how many students are actually quarantined. Now, these new rules also call for weekly testing coupled with masking and social distancing to keep the kids in the classroom.
The New York City public schools have been one of the safest places to be in this city. So if you're masked and you're moving by someone in a hallway, that does not constitute close contact. The bottom line here, though, is we see from the CDC guidance the value of masking and distance both play a role.
We have the twin goal: first, keeping kids safe; second, keeping kids in school, learning in person as much as possible.
So the quarantine policy being called into question by City Councilman Mark Treyger, who also chairs the Education Committee. He joins us this morning with reaction, of course, to the latest changes. Councilman, good morning to you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Dan and Hazel. Thank you for having me.
So, Councilman Treyger, let's get to this because you and I just spoke over the weekend and a lot has changed since Sunday morning. The updated COVID guidelines for New York City schools, for example, more in line now with CDC guidelines. So why don't you think that that will actually work for students if the CDC is saying it will?
Dan, 3 weeks ago, the health commissioner testified at my hearing defending the old quarantine policy that they just recently changed, saying it's the gold standard. Children under the age of 12, there is still no vaccine. And they still don't give us data on how much staff in schools are vaccinated as well. And what changed? What changed was that the number of quarantines, the number of positive cases, it didn't look good for the mayor. He still hasn't given us full attendance figures yet per school and per zip code. So that's what changed. So yesterday's decision, in my opinion, was more political than it was rooted in public health.
Let me ask a follow-up here, because so you're saying they changed it because the numbers weren't there. But from what I understand, you were hearing from sources who were saying that maybe health officials were not on board with this change. Can you dive into that a little further?
Yes, I am told that there were a series of very intense conversations with a number of high-level stakeholders, City Hall, folks involved with labor, health officials. Not everyone was on the same page about this choice and decision. And look, it makes sense because just a few weeks ago, they came to my hearing saying this was the gold standard of protection. And again, I want to spell this out for parents and for the public. What they're saying now is that only those children who are closest in proximity to the positive case in elementary school class will have to quarantine. Dan, kids move around. This is not how the Delta variant works. And so it boggles my mind how they even reach this conclusion.
And the other thing is not all kids are going to wear their masks while they're in the classroom. And that's a huge duty for teachers to be able to police that masking regulation.
Correct. And imagine, first of all, many classes also can't safely physical distance. And now teachers and principals are going to have to figure out who was 2 feet close, who was 4 feet close, who was sharing cookies. This is getting absurd. And that's why, to me, overall, this was a step backward. And also about testing, they said that they're making testing weekly. It is still not required. You can't test children if you don't get their consent forms back. And I am told citywide, the number of return forms is very low.
But don't you think the COVID testing, increasing it, it's a good thing? Teachers were calling for that.
So Hazel, yes, I think we should require testing, but testing is still not required. They're not allowed to test any child if the child does not return a consent form. And I'm being told that many children still have not returned their forms. There's a school in southern Brooklyn, has over 1,500 students. Only 90 of them have returned their forms so far.
So basically, Councilman, if I understand this correctly, they're testing the same people over and over again.
Dan, that is bingo. They will be testing the same small group of kids who return their forms, who are unvaccinated, over and over again. I believe we should require testing across the board and return a remote option if families don't feel comfortable doing that.
Which families have been very vocal about. They've told us, right, numerous times that they don't feel comfortable. The school's chancellor's been here a number of times saying, we're not doing it, all right? We're not going back to remote learning. We feel like the best thing happens in the classroom. So what can be done then, Councilman, right? You're raising the red flag. Is there another hearing you can have? What can be done?
Dan, I'm in the process of speaking with attorneys and the City Council Speaker's Office about our ability to maybe subpoena information. Because of mayoral control, we're limited in terms of what we can require of the DOE, but we need a lot more data, attendance figures, vaccination, a whole bunch more information that we just don't have right now. I'm also looking into seeing what we could require of the Department of Health to go back to more stringent testing. I believe we need to have a much more bolder testing plan as we wait for a vaccine to be rolled out for younger children, which I pray as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom line, we have to keep those students and teachers safe. Thanks so much, Councilman Mark Treyger, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Hazel and Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.